paixão. Portugal é mar.
O mar para mim é o sítio onde eu me reencontro todos os dias.
O mar para mim é minha vida, minha maior paixão.
O mar para mim é energia.
Sea for me is where I long to be. The sea is my church and my playground.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nysse Arruda. I'm a journalist and curator of the Communication Center of the Oceans, a series of live stream talks addressing the most diverse topics related to oceans, connecting Portuguese-speaking countries and making Portugal a hub for sharing up-to-date information and knowledge about oceans. Thank you to the speakers who I'm going to introduce. The institutional partnership with UNESCO and COI, and mainly the support and the sponsorship of the company Vestas, specialized in wind energy. Today, it's the World Wind Day. We are here to speak about the wind as a pioneering renewable energy. I will introduce the speakers. Engineer Martin Kaasgaard. He is the head of Vestas Technology Center Porto in Portugal. He holds a master's degree in industrial engineering and management from Aalborg University and has an executive MBA from Saïd Business School, University of Oxford. Then we have also Marco Alves, Chief Innovation Officer of CoLab Plus Atlantic, Doctor or PhD in mechanical engineer, a master degree in strategic management. Francisco Correia de Fonseca, offshore operations specialist at WavEC-Offshore Renewables, marine renewable energy engineer. We are going to start in English, speaking with Dr. Martin Kaasgaard.
I would like to start this talk with a question about Vestas Technology Center Porto. Would you please give more details about it?
Yes, thank you so much. Vestas Technology Center Porto is a development center. It's research and development within wind turbines, wind services, and developing wind turbine parks located in Matosinhos in north of Porto. We have over 500 engineers and specialists in the development center within mechanical engineering, within material science, within data, AI, we have multiphysics, we have basically all engineering disciplines present in our center. So it was established in 2017 and as a development arm of Vestas, which is headquartered in Denmark. We established ourselves in Portugal and are working closely with Portuguese universities and research institutes.
That is very important, this kind of relationship between the business and the research and the universities. It's like a triangle that is very important.
Absolutely.
And with the energy crisis that is taking shape, especially in Europe nowadays, and the climate issues, the use of wind for energy production becomes crucial at this time. What is the role of Vestas in both Denmark and Portugal?
So Vestas' overall mission is to decarbonize the planet by developing more competitive and more efficient energy solutions for the world. Both Denmark and Portugal are pioneers within application and usage of wind as an energy source, and we want to make sure we try and utilize the capabilities in Porto to bring new solutions to market.
Incredible. And these new turbines, they have been becoming lighter, taller, more electrically efficient. And they are solutions for all these challenges nowadays.
Absolutely. What have been happening over the last decade or so is turbines have gone up in size, they've gone down in weight and up in efficiency. So we are creating bigger and bigger turbines with more and more output, suitable for more markets as well.
And there is also these new configurations or custom configurations, as we say, like modular building blocks, like a wind float, for instance.
Exactly. So we have modularized our turbines, meaning we can configure them to fit our customers' needs and wants, whether it's offshore or onshore.
Great. And it could be on land or at sea.
Absolutely.
Doesn't matter. As Vestas is a global leader in sustainable energy solutions, both onshore and offshore, what are the plans for new areas of development?
So we are present in everywhere where we can develop new technologies within wind or within services or within developments. In the long term, we want to continue to be the world leader in decarbonizing the planet.
We have an image including the global leader in sustainable energy solutions. That is very interesting, this picture. And the future of energy will surely be powered by wind, solar, and hydroelectric power. And the presence of renewable and wind energy has gaining momentum.
Absolutely. So wind is currently the most or the cheapest source of energy on most places on the planet, but we need all sources. We need PV, we need solar. We need hydro as well. We need geothermal as well. But wind is the dominating source of energy and the most cost-efficient one.
And we have this kind of index that stands for performance index, meaning production and associated costs. And in that respect, wind energy is much more cost-effective.
That's correct. So we've measured all energy sources in levelized cost of energy, meaning you take what it generates and what it costs and turn that into an index. And here, wind has decreased with more than 60% over the last 10 years in costs. And is now the dominant factor in renewable energy.
In the scenario of renewable energy is perfect. And by the end of 2020, the Vestas company had collaborated with closest stakeholders to install more than 76,068 wind turbines in 83 countries with an incredible capacity. It is 129 gigawatts.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, incredible. Those are, and avoiding the emission
of more than 1.5 billion tons of CO2.
Incredible.
It is incredible.
It is incredible, really. Nowadays, we don't get this information so easily, you know. It's not so easily to find. And the issue of sustainability is central to the Vestas company.
Absolutely.
And recently, it was awarded the Global Index distinction by the Corporate Knights. Please tell me about it.
So in the beginning of 2022, we received this #1 award from Corporate Knights, naming us the most sustainable company in the world. We are, of course, very proud of that. We are having sustainability close at heart, and we have several places where we can see that we have tractions on sustainability. We believe in sustainability in everything we do.
Exactly. And the ranking also shows that they score from 67 to 73. So it's a big jump as well. So what is Vestas' sustainability strategy for the future?
So we have launched a sustainability strategy called Sustainability in Everything We Do. It is at the core of our hearts in everything we do, as the name says. We have based it on the science-based targets where we need to keep temperature rises below 1.5 degrees. And we have primarily centered this around two targets. So a carbon neutrality in 2030 and a zero waste turbine and supply chain in 2040. And that sounds far away, but it really isn't.
But it is a road to that. And Vestas is also a member of Getting to Zero Coalition, that is organization, right?
That's correct.
And also, you are now main partner of Mercedes-Benz EQ Formula E team.
Yes, we
it's
are.
It's a e-car championship.
So it's there's the Formula One, which everybody knows, but there's also the Formula E, which is with electrical race cars.
Okay.
And Vestas is the prime sponsor of the Mercedes-Benz team on this.
And also Vestas is also very much committed to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, especially the 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. Of course, goal number 7 with affordable and clean energy is close to our hearts, but also within responsible consumption and production and the climate action and life below water is something we have in our sustainability report as well that we measure on how we do.
And for us in the communication center of the ocean, the 14 is really close to us as well.
Yes.
So could you advance the topic of development of new turbines and distribution networks?
Yes. So as I said, our goal is to build a zero waste turbine in 2040.
By 2040.
And that requires a lot of effort now. It requires that we already now develop solutions for what happens end of life. What do we do with products if we cannot fully recycle them? And this is what we are working on right now.
And incredible, because the Vestas wind turbines require very little energy to produce compared to your own production, meaning a single Vestas wind turbine will generate around 30 to 50 times more energy than it will use in its entire life cycle. Correct. So it produces for itself more than needed to be produced.
That's correct.
Okay.
You can say that both the energy and the CO2 that required to produce the turbine and install it and make it ready for producing energy is displaced after a few months of operation. Depending on which turbine it is, it's between 4 and 8 months.
Okay, and in this period of time, the turbine will generate the same amount of energy needed to produce them. It's incredible. And tell me about the third generation of Blue Marlin turbines.
The Blue Marlin, or the V236, as it's called, is currently under development. So we're building a prototype in Lindø in Denmark. It's a massive turbine. One turbine can power 20,000 households, and we're building that now, and we're putting that on the market at the end of 23 or early 24.
Fantastic. And also, it's important to mention that the turbines have very low water consumption, and that is a key factor in this scenario nowadays, I mean globally.
Absolutely. Turbine operation requires virtually no water in operating.
And wind energy is among the solutions for the challenges that we are faced today, and with the prediction that by 2050, nearly half of the world population will be living in areas where water is scarce.
Yes, we strongly believe that wind is a major part of the solution.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. We are
much.
going to follow to talk to Marco, and I will be... agora eu vou falar em português. Não.
To speak in Portuguese. Mr. Martin is going to have the translation. Thank you. Perfect. The first question to Mr. Marco. we could start your installment with an approach to the importance of the energy independence in today's world scenario. Yes, it's in fact a hot topic because, for the reasons we already know, it is not worthwhile to mention them, and because, well, we feel this. We live in the forefront of a geopolitical reorganization. So energy independence is almost an issue of national sovereignty in some areas. So it's really very important. I would like to bring some figures to give more soundness to these affirmations. The EU energy independence has been decreasing since 2000. It would be 85%. Today, it declined to approximately 60%. And Portugal is in the middle of the table with the energy dependence of 65%. How can renewable energies or the exploitation of endogenous resources can play in this context? I think there are three aspects, important aspects. The first is to alleviate the consequences, to mitigate the climate consequences. We have mentioned the CO2 emissions, and also an additional issue that has to do with improving safety in supply, which is also a critical issue. And this is made with an energy mix and with several sources. We cannot depend on only one or two sources. We have to increase the number of contributions with the energy mix. It's a common sense. Yes, it's like investing in the stock exchange. We cannot invest in only one type of shares. And then to mitigate dependence, I would say, just to give you a final answer, renewable energies bring a contribution to a solution which is unique, a unique solution for three problems: climate crisis, the issue of security, and energy independence. It's the three-pillar which is key to any country, and we see the reflex of this in Europe. We are having this terrible scenario regarding this dependence on energies, fossil energies. And now the question is, what are the main barriers that should be overcome in order to improve or enhance the competitiveness of renewable energy sources, especially the emerging sources? Because wind is the well-known. Well, the challenges, I think, are limited because you said and mentioned the LCOE. It's an index of performance that compares production of energy with the costs associated with this production of energy, reflects the cost of energy produced. The barriers that are more important are in fact those that increase LCOE. And we have two levels, a technology level. If we reduce the CapEx, initial costs, the investment with new materials, with new approaches, building approaches are very important. Also the OpEx, operating costs with maintenance, with reliable technology has also a very important impact in reducing OpEx. And then something very important that influences or can influence the LCOE. We can quantify as accurately as possible issues that have to do with positive externalities associated with environmental benefits and the impact itself, environmental impact by itself. And then I would say that in a less technological perspective, there are two relevant aspects. The first, an articulation between different uses of space, how we can combine, for instance, an offshore wind farm with the production of algae or aquaculture. This vision that is integrative in order to decrease conflicts or disputes in space, to create an ecosystem. And then there is another aspect to finish. The regulations. The regulations are very important because a transparent regulation with clear rules will allow clear and with a long-term perspective, allow to attract investment, which is fundamental. To attract investment means to gain scale, to create volume, meaning to reduce costs, meaning to attract more investment. So we start a virtuous cycle, which is quite advantageous. It's a circular economy thing. Yes, it has a very important impact here. But to attract investment, to gain volume, to reduce costs, and to attract, it's the perfect formula. Yes, we are speaking about this, but then the reality becomes a little bit more difficult. But it's perfect. It's the common sense. It's the obvious. It's incredible because why things take so long. And you also said the importance of having an energy mix, not only the wind energy, but the solar energy, nuclear energy. Nuclear, I am a little bit anti-nuclear. But nuclear should be put aside, in my opinion. But there is still space or room for discussion. The nuclear is an option that we should not consider. We have spoken about this in a previous speech. The wave energy, the sea energy, this is a new technology. Yes, the TRL, the technology readiness level. Technology is behind if compared with the wind. Wind means floating wind because the other one is an established industry, but waves are a little bit behind. But this articulation between the two energy forms are very synergic because the offshore wind park or farm, the waves are already there. And if we could combine the two things, it would be a win-win approach. Yes, there are some studies in order to explore this articulation. What are the impacts associated with the development of the renewable energy sector are expectable from the social and economic point of view? There are many, but I would like to again emphasize the LCOE, which is a performance index that has been contested for some important players in this area because it does not reflect what you said. The social economic aspects take into account several costs, but they don't consider the social economic dimension. Just to give you an additional information to this subject, there is a study from an independent body of the European Union that anticipates that the installed power in 2030 in Portugal, the floating wind power is 3 gigawatts, representing or accounting for 40,000 jobs, and an annual turnover of 5,000 million euros with an outstanding impact. We cannot hide this. And I think, and we have organized some weeks ago some talks with BBVA. I think you knew about it. And we had discussed the notion that some financial entities have of this reality, namely the banks. And when they assess a project such as this one, they don't only consider the LCOE, but other index. The LCOE, it's the same, but it takes into account the social economic aspect, and banks consider these things. It's the financial sector or industry that see the perspectives of a certain investment because decision today is in line with the principles of the LSG environment, social environment. Those philosophies are already interiorized in some banks and branches. So people tend to look to the problem in an holistic way. And banks and insurance companies, they know and consider the climate change dangers. I don't have much contact with insurance companies, but I may say maybe yes. Insurance companies are really making research on the probabilities of having climate change problems because they are insurers. So they are a fundamental piece in this chain. Well, speaking about the issue related with the amount of data and metadata, this is so fashionable nowadays to be combined for a smart approach to renewable energy development. How could it be done? Today, people speak about meta-analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, and there is a mixture of concepts just to try to bring some light into it. The data by themselves are nothing. The important thing is the capacity to extract information from the data we have. If we are unable to extract information, data are useless. That's why we bring machine learning algorithms that are able, with historic data, to create patterns. And those patterns allow us to anticipate the future. And why is this useful? Because this has a huge impact in the competitiveness of the sector. For instance, if I want, I can understand patterns of failures of a turbine, of a component, and to improve, anticipate, or optimize planning, the planning of operations and maintenance and inspection, possibly. So this capacity to anticipate the future will allow to improve these strategies of maintenance and operation. Regarding the wind farms, and offshore more than that, has costs during life cycle. 30% are costs of maintenance and operation. If we have a follow-up on turbines, and if I associate satellite data, oceanic data, and if I'm able to optimize maintenance strategies, I will be able to reduce 35% into 25%, and this has a huge impact in the competitiveness of the industry and the costs, and costs to the consumer as well. Regarding the particular case of Portugal, how do you think the country can position itself in this field? I feel about this to speak in favor of Portugal. Well, I think Portugal has here a unique opportunity, a golden opportunity, given the vast Atlantic coastline and the conditions we have, and the possibility to materialize it. There is a need to give maturity to the supply chain we have in Portugal. And how do you do that? And we are speaking about this emerging world, the floating wind energy, and we have to attract projects to Portugal, to attract technology, to technologist experts to Portugal, for our supply chain to give appropriate answers, because this gives maturity to the supply chain. To give maturity to the supply chain, make us to position itself in a scale-up phase. And this is the main advantage. The positioning starts now. We have to be able to create the conditions now with the capacity to provide support with services of technological and scientific basis. And then we have another parameter to give conditions to those experts with the appropriate infrastructures. Portugal is taking the right steps forward in this area. It's an outstanding initiative. And then we have another aspect, critical aspect, which is how this despite the support, technical and scientific support, how can we decrease even more the risk of a specialist to install technology here? This is made with the detailed characterization of what is our coastline, namely the most important places for this type of technology. The issue of knowing the water column, the temperature data, salt level, quality of the water, type of soil, a huge number of data that will allow the specialist to know where he is installing the technology. Otherwise, there is another risk for the specialist, and he will choose other areas where this risk is mitigated. And this is done inland. And this principle has to be applied in oceans. It's a more unstable scenario. It's more difficult when we speak about the ocean for several reasons. But I think the principle is this one, to know our sea in detail as much as possible. Well, now we are going to have the United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon, and this conference is going to approach this data. We have to know the field. I don't know the dimension of Portugal. We are the 9th biggest country in the world with exclusive areas. This Atlantic vocation, this has to be explored. Sometimes the Portuguese language does not interpret this very well, but people have to know what they are doing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much once again. Thank you for the invitation. I didn't thank you before, but I thank you now. It's always a master class. We learn a lot with you. Now, I will pass on to Francisco Correia de Fonseca, engineer. From the installation and maintenance point of view, which is your area of expertise, what are the main advantages of floating wind farms compared to the fixed offshore wind farms in high sea? Thank you. I will follow the suggestion, and to thank you beforehand for the invitation. When we are in high sea, deep sea, we have more wind, and we can install bigger machines or platforms. We may have bigger turbines, and if we are speaking about turbines of 10 megawatts, we are speaking about machines with 118 meters high, 200 meters wide, bigger than a football field, just to give you a reference. What happens here in Portugal? The floating wind farms, the floating platforms can be installed in deep water areas, and this is good news to Portugal because coastline waters are deep, and therefore areas where the depth is beyond 50 meters, the area is no longer competitive to have fixed infrastructures and becomes more interesting to have floating platforms. From the point of view of installation, one of the biggest advantages of the floating wind farms is that this work can be done in Porto. And this is good from the cost point of view because we can use less expensive vessels and risks of working in high sea. There are risks in working in high sea, and this is mitigated as well. And cranes. The cranes is also considered. When we are working in high sea to install a fixed wind farm, we are speaking about type of works that last for a year, or vessels, big vessels that cost approximately 400,000 euros a day. When we start to have floating platforms, we can do the installation and build a platform in Porto, reallocate them using small installations, so there is a big advantage here. It's like the work is done inland, and then we carry the energy into land. Depending on the type of platform, floating platform, it can be stored in a simpler way after being disassembled. There are platforms which are not so deep, 20 meters of high, 10 of high to come into the port. Some of them can reduce the height when it enters the port, the harbor, like a boat, like a vessel. They can come in the harbor and make the installation. This is really very sophisticated, very enthusiastic technologies, and Portugal has a great opportunity. And really, the high competition technicians, they have a lot of technology. Our knowledge comes from hundreds of experience in the sea. How can we reduce the cost of maintenance of a wind farm? We can reduce the costs in several ways. The maintenance costs can be associated with indirect costs, direct costs as well. The direct costs are paid by the director of the farm, and indirect costs, the turbine is switched off, it's not producing energy, and is not producing revenue. Or failures. If there is a failure, the turbine is switched off, has to be repaired, so we have direct and indirect costs. The first type, from the design point of view, is to try to reduce the probabilities of failure and the number of frequencies on how many times you have to do maintenance to the turbine. On the other hand, it has to do also with something that Marco said, maintenance strategies, optimize maintenance strategies. We choose the right heights to do the maintenance of the farms when there is less wind, less loss of revenue when the turbine is stopped, but also maintenance strategies that can minimize the total cost of the operations using cheaper vessels. Of course, the floating wind brings this opportunity. So the drones, the robot technologies will have an important role. Yes, right now we also have a project that is exploring this. There is a lot of work to do in maintenance work to the tower or to the turbine. Instead of using someone in the turbine hanging, can be done with a drone, and they do it in less time, less costs, less risks. It's quite a good advantage. So technology has been very interesting, namely with the visual thing, when we may have a bird view, not from the top, but also under the water. We also have robots under the water with motor operating vehicles that have cameras and sensors that can see and watch everything under the water in an offshore wind farm. It's very enthusiastic. Yes, I'm so excited because during the last speech we spoke with the Portuguese researchers in a consortium. It's something else that I'm going to add. They developed a camera, an object, by the way, that is like an hyperbaric camera that goes to the bottom of the sea, is able to capture the animals, bring them to the surface without killing them. exactly like the divers cameras. Biologists will have the possibility to see the living organism or animal. Coming back to the subject, in the seeds, this is fundamental because you are in a hostile environment, and we have many things that can happen, and the technology can be one more step forward, helping the humans to bring forward the development. Going to the third questions, what are the biggest challenges in maintaining a floating wind farm? You spoke about the cranes. Yes, there is the challenge of the equipment when turbines are getting bigger. If the maintenance is done offshore in the sea next to the turbine, if we need cranes, we are using vessels that are unusual. We don't have many of this type, and they are very expensive. And cranes have to have the capacity to bring weight at high level. To the biggest turbines, we still don't have vessels able to do this type of maintenance. One of the challenges, namely for the floating farms, we have a platform that is moving, is replying to the forces of wind and currents, and we have to do an operation between two platforms. Both are floating in a vessel that is not fixed, and another one that is floating, and bring people from one to the other has risks, and they are very limited in terms of wind and waves. And to combine the movement of both of them. Now, speaking about the advantages of Portugal for the floating wind power sector, what are the infrastructure needs? Marco has already spoken about the main issues related to data, which are quite important. Portugal is very well positioned in terms of knowledge. We already have a demonstrator and a commercial farm in Viana do Castelo, so we are well positioned in terms of knowledge about our marine sector. We have to accommodate the new farms that will come up. We have and we want to invite specialists to come and install the farms. We need to have harbors with capacity and shipyards able to do the construction of those platforms, but also to accommodate big vessels that may be necessary to do this type of work. These harbors have to have cranes and necessary space to have big components, so there is a need for a ready marine infrastructure, but also the electrical infrastructure. We cannot forget that. We are producing electricity in high sea. We have to transport, to carry this electricity to land, and we have to dissipate and to distribute inland. Like a network, it's an electrical net. These points have to have offshore infrastructures in a chain to distribute electricity, able to accommodate future amounts of energy. The 3 gigawatts announced by the government recently, we have to have ready electrical infrastructure, and we also have to have the legislation on that. The physical infrastructure can also be easier between brackets always, because it requires investment and knowledge, but legislation is quite difficult, so that the practical part can go on. We have to mobilize several types of entities and to do many studies, and this takes time. We have to accelerate, otherwise, because we have now a unique opportunity. And Marco said Portugal has a privileged position, a lot of sea, endless sea. Having the islands in the middle of this scenario, see, we have Madeira and Azores like anchors to interconnect the technology, I suppose. Yes, and we also want the industry to come. And therefore, not only the farms here, but also to have a national production chain. This is an opportunity that we have for the floating wind farm to accommodate in Portugal. Otherwise, if it doesn't come to Portugal, goes elsewhere. It's a very specific profile. Portugal has a unique profile, very appropriate to this type of energy. And the capacities for that, because we have fantastic institutes for research and technology. WavEC is an example. CoLab is Vestas that has its own research center in Porto. There is a combination of corporate net that exists. They are already present and acting. So we have to be able to create the perfect scenario or environment so that those foundations will be able to develop very quickly. Fantastic. I'm really very happy for your participation. I learn a lot with my speakers. Every time I organize such a talk, I thank for the participation of everyone. And we also thank 11. We don't have a blue sky today. It's raining, a rain that is refreshing the summer that is about to come. And to thank Vestas company. And see you soon for one more talk from the Oceans 2022. Thank you and good afternoon.
Mar é a minha paixão. Portugal é mar.
O mar para mim é o sítio onde eu me reencontro todos os dias.
O mar, para mim, é minha vida, minha maior paixão.
O mar para mim é energia. O mar para mim é o princípio da vida.
Sea for me is where I long to be. The sea is my church and my playground.